When you think of spiritual gifts, you probably think of things like preaching, you think of things like teaching, you think of things like giving and encouraging and all these other things that we generally associate with the work of doing ministry. But we don't often talk about administration. It's the most boring of all of the spiritual gifts. I mean, just calling a spade is a spade. There's not many of us who enjoy and appreciate a good, clean spreadsheet. There's not a lot of us who will sit here and casually organize our thoughts using PowerPoint slides. Some of us are like that. I might be one of these people, and maybe a couple of you are those individuals. And if you are, then you may know how a lot of people think it's kind of weird. They may just not understand why it is you are kind of drawn towards these kind of activities, helping people to organize their thoughts and helping come up with plans for how to execute things. The problem is that when we overlook the gift of administration, we quickly start finding out how shortly lived our ministries can actually be. We start figuring out that maybe God actually put administrators in our church family for a reason. Maybe there's actually a purpose, a real practical purpose, and not just a boring legal purpose, but an actual ministry, a heart purpose behind the gift of administration. This is something that we see in the Bible, and something that you'll read in Acts are examples of people using their gifts of administration. Typically, when we think of deacons, we like to talk about deacons as being those head servants, those individuals that are actively doing and rolling up their sleeves in the ministries of a church. But did you know when you actually first see deacons getting appointed as a part of a church, it's really more of an administrative thing. It's something where there were individuals that some of the Gentile Christians felt were being overlooked, and the apostles realized that there was a need to have individuals administrate inside the church family. If they didn't, then the individuals who were doing a lot of the teaching and preaching would be torn away just trying to keep the lights on, so to speak. Well, as churches, we end up finding ourselves much in the same situation. Everybody wants to be the person that does the exciting stuff. We all want to be somebody that is responsible for bringing people to Christ. And we all want to be the individual that are doing the things that look good when you put them on Instagram. But there's not a lot of personal glory to be attained in doing some of the boring stuff and helping organize things and helping to do scheduling and helping to line up people to work in this capacity or that capacity. And so because of that, sometimes we just stick our head in the sand and we pretend like it's not there. But when we do that as a modern American church, what we end up finding are church families that are crumbling and falling apart, because that strong infrastructure that is essential to make ministry work simply isn't there. Sadly, in the church today, you see so many pastors averaging 3 to 4 years at any one church, in many instances 3 to 4 years in ministry at all, simply because they get overwhelmed and burnt out by the fact that nobody wants to do the boring stuff. And so it begs the question, when we look at ourselves and we look at our own church family, who are the administrators? And when we identify who those people are that have that gift of administration, how are they putting that gift of administration to work so that the church body as a whole can be more effective for the work that God has called it? Now, when we look in the Bible, we actually end up seeing two different versions of administration. It's not all just creating spreadsheets, as much as that may disappoint some of you. No, there's actually two different versions. One of them is Kubernetes, which is more of guidance. It's more of actually helping to support and help provide that kind of framework or that structure for things to be able to happen. I mean, imagine that individual who has to be responsible for lining up individuals to help out at a community meal, or somebody who helps set up who the volunteers are going to be for services or for childcare, for something like that. Those individuals are participating in that Kubernetes. Now, there's another form of administration, and the Greek word for that we end up seeing in the Bible is proistemi. And what that proistemi is more of the leadership form of administration. There's certainly a degree of leadership that goes along with trying to herd the cats. We've all heard that phrase, right? And when you're herding the cats, by definition, that implies that you're some form of a shepherd. This is something that a lot of us have found ourselves being in the position of, that individual that people are looking to say, well, what's the plan? How are we putting things together? How are we going to, execute this thing that we're doing? In a lot of ways, this is what we end up seeing a lot of pastors doing, being that individual that is responsible for that proistemi. But once again, that's why it becomes so essential that individuals who have this gift, who have identified that God has given them an ability to organize, to think, to plan things out, come to help. Because otherwise what ends up happening are individuals who may have other spiritual gifts that they can use for teaching, for caring, for serving, are not able to do that because they end up spending all their time having to just kind of keep the wheels moving of the church or the ministry or whatever religious thing it is that they're trying to support. As we sit here and we look in the Bible, we have to be confronted by one hard truth, and that is that God gives us gifts so that they can be used. Something that you'll read in your small groups here in a second is something that we read in 1 Peter, and what we end up seeing is basically an urging to say, if you have this gift, then use these gifts that God has given you for a good reason and a good purpose. Administration, on the face of it, may seem like something that can be very boring and very dry. Very few of us, even those of us who have high tolerances for them, enjoy just sitting through endless meetings over and over and over again. As somebody who recently had to spend the last 3 weeks going through nothing but meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting, it's not fun and we don't enjoy it. But what we end up finding is that regardless of what God has called us to do, if we are faithful and if we are doing things for the right reason, not so that we can be fulfilled, not so that we can feel like we're valuable, and not so that we can get the glory, but we're doing it because we recognize that God has a plan for us and that God is going to carry us through, then I think what we'll find is that things that may seem boring and draining on the face of it are actually things that are energizing. Not because we are capable, but because God makes us capable. I'm not going to try to lie to you and tell you that administration is going to be exciting to everyone. It's absolutely not. However, just because it's not exciting doesn't mean that it's something that we can dismiss. Nothing that is made of God, if God is who we truly say He is, can be ignored. If God has given us gifts, if He's given us calling, if He's given us passion, then we owe it to our God who has done all things for us, who has blessed us with all things and given us all things and permits us to do the things that we're able to do. We owe it to this God to serve Him with everything that we have. And so regardless of whether your talents are in the spiritual gift of administration or something else, you have to stop and look at your gifts and ask yourself, am I willing to do these things? Even when they seem draining, even when they seem boring, even when it seems like not the most exciting thing going on in the church. Am I willing to do the thing that is hard because God was first willing to do the hard thing for me? That's the lesson that I have for you today. I hope you're able to get something out of it. Until we can meet again, God bless.